Hey everyone, welcome back to Big Strong Book. I am Reed, and today we are going to be discussing Philip K. Dick's 1969 novel, Ubik, collected here in the Library of America, Volume 4 Novels of the 1960s. So this book, Ubik, um, it was so fantastic. In in so many ways. Um, you know, one can think of books that might blow you away when you read them. More often than not, um, I find that those kinds of books are the same ones where, it's a cliche, right, to say that there are some books where you just can't put them down. But Ubik is one of those books. I mean, as I've mentioned with the other Dick novels that I've reviewed on this channel, they're all not that long in terms of word count, page count, whatever. Um, they're very digestible works in terms of the time commitment that you have to give to them. But one thing that is unique, or just one of the things, the first thing I'll mention here that is unique about Ubik is that unlike androids, unlike cosmic puppets, unlike Man in the High Castle, Three Stigmata, Ubik rolls forward at a massive, unrelenting pace. It's just insane. Like, I know it is a cliche to say that, that these things might just, that you can't put it down, but I was almost tempted. I didn't have the time. I had to do other things. I didn't have the time to read the book in one sitting, but good Lord, I certainly felt tempted to. Um, the version of this book that I have, it's the final book collected in this volume, and the way that it is printed in here, it's about 195 pages. So again, not that long of a book. There's the print in these Library of America editions. I would show it, but it probably wouldn't come up well on the camera. But it's not like they scrunched the page. They it's a very they're very readable pages, and so it's a nice easy 200 pages, but it is a it is an unrelenting 200 pages in the best possible way. And I found with, reading Three Stigmata, which I posted a review for a few days ago, that I didn't mention this, I think, in that review, but one of the things that I know was important to understand about something like that, or a book like Three Stigmata, was to just go with the flow of the book, move with how it processes the story. Don't really stop to think a lot about what is going on if it is a confusing environment, because things will get answered, maybe not everything, but things will be answered in due time. It's all about the experience. And, the experience of reading, the experience of letting a story enter your mind, because, essentially when you read a book, you are opening yourself to a story. to the style of the prose, the characters, just everything about the book, the author, the author's intentions, the baggage from their own lives that authors carry into their work, because every author has a piece of themselves in their work, something that they are trying to wrestle with, especially in these kind of literary novels. Not in every novel, but in most literary-esque novels. And but I feel like in terms of reviewing books and the books I've reviewed, I tend to go on the ideas, the themes, and things like that. But I don't think I've truly talked about, because what we remember from books that we love is the emotions that it conjures with us. That is ultimately the most powerful thing that any author can do. Um, and I mean, one could maybe say, that's the reason why books that are super popular, I don't know, I think of authors like Colleen Hoover, who I've never read her books and I never intend to. Um, but big, like popular, the popcorn authors or whatever you might want to call them. But you can't deny that there is something that is connecting with readers, and that is an emotional investment. With those, it's more emotional into the characters. But Ubik, it is an investment for the readers to get pulled in. But it's the best thing that I can equate Ubik to is riding a roller coaster, specifically like riding a roller coaster in pitch darkness, almost like what is it called, the Rock and Roller Coaster at Disney World. But it's so much more intense, and it's so trippy, but again, it works so well. It's such a tightly paced narrative, and similar to what I said with the Cosmic Puppets when I reviewed that, about how that didn't necessarily overstay its welcome. Ubik is the exact right length. It could have been longer. Oh, there are plenty of opportunities for the mysteries, the nature of reality within the world of this book to maybe have it go on for another 100, 200 pages. But I admired Dick for doing this in the Cosmic Puppets. One could argue Three Stigmata as well, but also with Ubik, that he chooses to end it when he does. He doesn't let the narrative overstay its welcome. He just ends it. He finds a good ending place and stops, rather than letting it continue and potentially drag the themes out, drag the concepts out, drag the narrative tract. So I mean, those are my initial, more emotional thoughts about this. But let me dive into a little bit about what this book is about, because I'm sure those of you who haven't read it, who are maybe wanting to, think about if it's worth reading, if it's for you. I've probably lost you by this point, almost 9 minutes in, but I hope I haven't. Anyway, so Ubik takes place in an alternate, for this book, a future 1992, and within this future, individuals with psychic powers have become a valuable industry and workforce. They're called, the psychic powers. So psychic powers that individuals within this world start to develop are telepathy and precognition. Those are the main two. There are others that aren't really fully explored, but the main two are telepathy, so, essentially reading people's minds, and precognition, seeing a path into the future. However, like other Dick short stories, like Minority Report, and like the Three Stigmata, where two main characters in Three Stigmata are precogs, Dick's version of precognition is if a character has precognitive abilities, that means that they see essentially into a multiverse of futures, but they see a future that has more of a glow around it than the others. So that future with a glow seems to be the most likely future that is to come. Yeah, that seems to be um, the most likely one. And so these individuals are utilized greatly in corporate espionage. Like corporations can hire these groups, but just like there are groups that have corporations can hire a team of telepaths and precogs to infiltrate an enemy or an you know an enemy corporation or whatever to figure out trade secrets, telepathy, precognition, and all of that. There are also organizations like Runsitter's group in this book, which mainly compose of a group of what are called inertials. Or inertials act almost like, and for every matter there's antimatter. For every thesis there's antithesis. There's a force and there's an anti-force. The inertials are more of an anti-force. There are anti-telepaths. There are anti-precogs who can block the influence. They can block the power of a telepath or a precog. Things like that. Another interesting layer of this world is that when humans die, if their bodies are cryogenically preserved shortly after death, they're put into these things called cold packs. If they are cryogenically preserved, the humans then enter what is called half-life. Essentially, they're mostly still alive, and you can talk to them, you can communicate with them, but they will eventually die. And, depending on your resources, depending on your wealth, depending on all of these other factors, if you you can select for your loved one to be put into half-life, to be cryogenically preserved, and to be placed at a moratorium where you can go and visit your loved one. But essentially, for every time you visit them, every time you wake them up from their kind of cryogenic slumber, that means the shorter their half-life becomes. So the more you talk to them, the less and less and less they have to live. However, essentially, it seems from the beginning of the book that, depending on how much money you have, you can also kind of preset how long a half-life can be. So you can select for your own half-life to be 100 years, so you can still live 100 years after you die. But of course, it costs a lot of money and influence to do that. So those are the two big things of this world. We have corporations using telepaths and precogs and these group folks called inertials to do battle with one another. And then there's also half-life. So the book opens with a man named Glenn Runsiter. Now, Glenn Runsiter operates he operates a group called Runsiter Associations. And his group of inertials has been tracking these telepaths and precogs from another group. I believe it's the Hollis Corporation or Hollis Associates. And he notices that all of their telepaths, or most of their telepaths and precogs, have gone missing. And he doesn't really understand where they are. Nobody really knows where they are. He's very confused by this. And then the book cuts to Joe Chip. Joe Chip is the protagonist of this book. He is a technician for Runsitter Associations. And the book opens with him. Oh, another interesting thing about this world that I failed to mention was almost everything is coin operated. So even like a front door to your apartment, you would have to pay 5 cents to open your door, and 5 cents to operate a coffee machine, get cigarettes, whatever. And that's something that's definitely played up for laughs. Now, Joe Chip is visited by a man named G.G. Ashwood. Ashwood does some scouting work for Runsitter Associations. Basically, what he does is he gets wind of these very powerful inertials that don't have a job with them yet, but that he goes out to scout them to see if they would be good for a job with working with Runsitter. And G.G. Atwood finds a girl named Pat Conley, and he brings her into Joe Chip because Joe can do these tests to determine if somebody, like, to determine the anti-precog or the anti-telepathic ability of somebody. He can really test that. And what G.G. Ashwood lets on is this girl, Pat, is insanely powerful. She is insanely powerful. Not only is she an anti-precog, but she essentially goes into the past and can alter the present to the point where nobody except her knows. So I will read a little bit of what Pat tells Joe. And the thing which is interesting is that Pat's parents are precogs that work for Hollis, kind of that antagonistic corporation that's mentioned at the beginning. So G.G. Ashwood tells Joe, when she was 6 years old, living in Detroit with her parents, of course, she broke a ceramic antique statue that her father treasured. Didn't your father foresee it? Joe asked her, with his precog ability. He foresaw it, Pat answered, and he punished me the week before I broke the statue. But he said it was inevitable. You know the precog talent. They can foresee, but they can't change anything. And then after the statue did break, after I broke it, I should say, I brooded about it. And I thought about that week before it broke when I didn't get any dessert at dinner and had to go to bed at 5 p.m. I thought, Christ, or whatever a kid says. Isn't there some way these unfortunate events can be averted? My father's precog ability didn't seem very spectacular to me, since he couldn't alter events. I still feel that way, a sort of contempt. I spent a month trying to will the damn statue back into one piece. In my mind, I kept going back to before it broke, imagining what it had looked like, which was awful. And then one morning when I got up, I even dreamed about it last night, there it stood, as it used to be. But neither of my parents noticed anything. It seemed perfectly normal to them that the statue was in one piece. They thought it had always been in one piece. I was the only one who remembered. So Joe does a test on Pat, and he realizes that her abilities are so powerful that they are insanely dangerous for anybody to work with. And nevertheless, they are still kind of brought before Runsitter. And Runsitter gathers 11 inertials for a mission to the moon, basically. There is a man named, I forget the name of the man who they're going to, Stanton Mick. There's a man named Stanton Mick who has an operation on the moon, or as they call Luna, and they decide to go, and they want to go on this mission because uh, Stanton Mick is afraid that some precogs and telepaths have infiltrated his organization, and they estimate that it's going to be a massive job, and that they're going to have to send 11 of their best inertials to the moon to deal with this. And so they do. They send people, including Pat. And Pat shows her ability to Runsiter because Runsiter asks her, he says, "Hey, Pat, why don't you show us your ability?" And then right after he says that, he's not in his office anymore. He's in a record store. And to him, something seems strange, as if he should actually be in his office. And then all of a sudden he's in his office again. But now Joe and Pat are married, but they weren't married before. And then Pat reveals to everybody, "I just went back and I changed some aspects of the past. But I did it, I thought about it, and it happened instantaneously when the past changed." So they're all a little bit shaken up about this. They're all a little bit weirded out. But Glenn Runsiter makes the decision to bring Pat along with the group of 10 other inertials plus a couple other people to go to the moon and see, okay, what the hell is this operation all about? So they go to the moon, and they're met by Stanton Mick. But then right before they're really going to begin to talk with them, Stanton Mick floats up into the air and blows up. Like there's a bomb that goes off. And so I'll say a little more because this isn't really spoilers. But I'll say a little more and then I'll kind of break off. So in the bomb, Runsiter has been killed. Runsiter has been killed, and he's in. They get the other team is the rest of the team is fine, and so now Joe is the leader, and so Joe puts Runsiter into a cold pack, and they're like, we got to get him back down to Earth as soon as we can, because his wife Ella, who is a precog who has been in Half-Life this whole time, we got to get it back down to his wife. But as they are going back to Earth, they notice something interesting. First, the corporation, nobody's trying to stop them from escaping. So that's strange. And then the next thing they start to notice is that they begin to feel weak. They begin to feel almost as if they are rapidly aging. Things around them seem outdated. Things from their present of 1992 don't seem to exist anymore. They begin to see Runsiter's face on coins, on their what are their dollar bills. Very strange occurrences. So that sets the stage for the plot. Anything after that is going to be major spoilers. This novel deals, as do pretty much the rest of Dick's novels, with the nature of reality. What is real? What is not? And it also extends like a battle between the forces of good and the forces of evil, the forces of death and the forces of living. But also with the thing about that our past is something so foreign to us. We think we understand our past, like for us in 2023, that we understand the world of 2013. But do some of us in 2023 understand the world of 1973, 1963? If we went back, or if we went back even further into the 30s and the 20s, could we even function in that world? Could we be fine if we had to all of a sudden live in the 1920s, the 1930s? And is it right? And this also kind of deals with more. This book deals with mortality, and kind of along with that notion of half life that I mentioned. Um, you know, is it right to extend human life, to extend human ability, or just do we lose ourselves all over again? And that's a theme that was also present in Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch. The idea of losing oneself irrevocably is something that could very well happen. So questions the morality of something like Half-Life. These are just a few. There's more I want to get. It's just, again, this novel, it's hard to talk about in a review like this because it is a visual novel. That, I mean, that's the best way to describe it. It is an extremely visceral and visual experience. For some people, that is their cup of tea, is a visual experience. It's not necessarily always my cup of tea, but I mean, Dick just, he does it so right with this book that it is so exciting. It is so full of life, and it's an adventure in a very dark and demented sense. And which brings me to another thing I do want to talk about, maybe before I get into some spoilers. But I just want to say, how in the whatever, how on earth has Ubik not been adapted into a feature film, or even or a TV adaptation or anything? It hasn't been adapted. And to me, and if you read this book, you will totally understand. You will totally understand that it plays in your head like a movie. Like it, I've even more so than Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the cosmic, any of the only other novel of his that I have read in the past couple of weeks that I can think of being on that same level of just sheer visceral experience is The Three Stigmata, which was another one that I was so puzzled with. How has this not become a movie? Or it's not even close to becoming a movie. Again, it baffles me that Three Stigmata, but especially Ubik, it just seems tailor-made to become a movie. That it would translate almost seamlessly, I think, into a movie. And so I did some looking online. And in the 70s, Philip K. Dick was commissioned to adapt Ubik into a screenplay. And he did. And I haven't read the screenplay. I really want to, and I will certainly in the near future. I will read Dick's screenplay for Ubik. But he made that, and it didn't get made into a movie. And then I believe in maybe 2006 or 2007, and I'm blanking on this guy's name, but the guy who produced Richard Linklater's adaptation of A Scanner Darkly, he was making some rumblings and some news about wanting to adapt Ubik, that maybe he had optioned the book to be adapted and that it was going to go into production in 2008 or 2009, but that project fizzled out. Then in about 10 years ago, 2013, maybe 2014, there is a French filmmaker, maybe I think his name might be Michel Gondry, and I know he's made some movies that I've at least heard of before. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but he was another one where he had optioned the book a few people had written some screenplays of it, but he hadn't found something that had satisfied him. And he came to the conclusion, and he said in an interview that the book is such a great literary experience, an experience as a novel, that now he doesn't really believe it can be adapted for the screen. It can't be translated from page to screen, which is a shame. And he even says, like, it is his dream to adapt Ubik, to direct a film adaptation of it. But again, I am so, I don't get it. And I don't get that. I would understand, a major Hollywood studio like Universal, 20th Century, Paramount, MGM, any of those big studios, like, would Ubik be fantastic potentially with a massive, like, $100 million budget? I think it could, but of course, no major studio is going to greenlight a huge adaptation of Ubik because the general public, they're not going to go see this movie. I guarantee you that. You could market it like it's a, but you can't really market it. You could market it as a action movie, as a time travel movie, but it's not any of those things. So yeah, you would have a very tough time marketing this novel as a movie or marketing an adaptation because it's a cross section of so many different genres. But given the success of a movie like, if any of you have seen Everything Everywhere All at Once that came out in 2022 last year, it's a great, fun movie that is almost kind of like the relentless pace. I think a car horn was going off there. Um, the relentless pace of the Everything Everywhere All at Once has not the same pace to Ubik, but I think they're comparable. And Everything Everywhere All at Once, I believe, was made for a budget of maybe $20 million. $20 million. And that movie, and I'm sure those of you who have seen it, I myself can attest to this, the visual effects in that movie were better than recent Marvel movies. And recent Marvel movies were made for they had 10 times the budget. They had 10 times the budget that this movie had. So a movie like a studio like A24 could pick up Ubik, they could option it, they could make a movie for like 15-20 million dollars. But I think if they find the right visual effects people to be involved with it, obviously a great director, and you need a great, because this is, I mean, you need a very strong actor for the role of Joe Chip, for the role of Glenn Runseter. You need a strong actress for Pat, but ultimately you need an ensemble cast because there are a lot of ensemble characters within that group of 11 inertials. Al Hammond, a few of the other characters. And but I'm so surprised that nothing has even been filmed. Like, you would think that even if there was an adaptation, it doesn't even have to be a good adaptation, but the fact that there hasn't been an adaptation, period, it baffles me. Um, and in doing some more thought about, like, what makes this, might go into a tangent about just film adaptations from the works of Philip K. Dick. But I think of the most successful in terms of box office returns. The most successful Philip K. Dick film adaptations are probably Total Recall and Minority Report. Those are probably the two most successful. those two both, if because I looked at it at an inflation calculator, and the inflation calculator for both movies meant that if they came out in 2023, they would have grossed about $600 million in the worldwide box office, which is that's a very good it's a very good turnout. But what did Total Recall and Minority Report have in common? They had a massive A-list celebrity star in the main role. Total Recall had Arnold Schwarzenegger, Minority Report had Tom Cruise, to the point where the theatrical release poster for Total Recall and the theatrical release poster for Minority Report, it's just Arnold's face and it's just Tom Cruise's face. And that's all you just could market their face and say big sci-fi movie starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. People are going to turn out in droves to see that. Likewise, big new action movie with Tom Cruise. Early 2000s, peak, arguably part of the peak of Tom Cruise. People are going to turn out to that. So I don't know if you would need, but again, this isn't an action movie unless they turned it into one. But then if you turn Ubik into an action movie, I think it really diminishes its visual storytelling potential. So who knows? A boy can dream, I guess, of Ubik someday becoming a movie. And likewise, other Philip K. Dick novels as well, because we haven't really had that many film adaptations of his work, particularly his novels. It's mainly been his short stories that have been adapted into movies. So who knows? Hopefully, sometime in the future, we'll get I'm keeping my fingers crossed for a Three Stigmata adaptation or a Ubik adaptation. So I don't know if I'm gonna get into spoilers just because, like, I would just to get into spoilers, I would just need to read the last half of the book out loud because it's such a relentless visual experience. It's hard to articulate even spoilerish thoughts. I mean, I can say right now, so spoilers. I mean, I loved the idea that Glenn Runsiter is actually still alive and the rest of the group is dead and they're experiencing Half-Life, and Half-Life is this deteriorating environment that Jory Miller has been creating, and just the wacky addition of Ubik in everything, as Ubik as Ubik, ubiquitous, this creator of everything within the universe, that somehow they've been able to tap into that to save people in Half-Life, but they can't ultimately save Joe because even though he has a lifetime supply of Ubik, he's already dead. He's already dead. I mean, he can sustain himself within this Half-Life universe, within this universe of Jory Miller, but not forever. And then, of course, and then the ending. I love the ambiguity of the ending. When Glenn sees Joe's face on a coin, and now he's like, wait. Initially, then you're like, wait, is Glenn actually dead? But then who's dead? Is everybody dead? I mean, if there is an answer, I mean, I know Dick never provided an answer as to the true nature of the ending, but I would assume that maybe they're all dead. They've been dead ever since the bomb. The bomb killed everybody, and they've all been in each other's thoughts because they're all linked up. That's possible. But this was just such a fun, cerebral visual novel. And I think it is better than Three Stigmata, but both of those books, I mean, man, to read both of these two books one in a row, it's quite possibly the best 1-2 punch that anybody could ask for. So, if you guys have read Ubik by Philip K. Dick, let me know what you think. This book has my highest recommendation. It is so brilliant. It is so fun. It's a roller coaster experience. I don't care how cliche anything I say sounds, it's the truth. So read this book. Let me know what you guys think, and I will see you next time.